Hello everyone, Linda Israel here, and today I want to share with you my handmade paper process. So I went outside and I handmade a bunch of papers. I've used my own handmade paper deckle that will make an 8.5 by 11 sheet of piece of paper. And then I had some shredded paper that was junk mail and whatnot that I used to make my paper pulp. I also had some colored papers that I used on other pages that I'll show you later. And let's see what else. I had some thread that was from my husband's embroidery shop. So let's go outside and we'll go through that whole process, and then we'll come back and I'll flip through the papers. Here I've got some shredded paper. I have a home paper shredder. I also had several friends that saved paper for me after they shredded it. And so it's been soaking in water. This happens to be soaking in water overnight. And then I have an old blender that I picked up at a thrift store. And what I like to do is just kind of reach in here and get a small handful of paper, and then I'll fill it with water. It's messy, so I'm doing it outside. So I'm just filling that with water, and then I'll put it on my cheap thrift store blender. Don't use your good blender, y'all. And I'm gonna liquefy it. The less you blend it, the chunkier it will be. And then once it's blended really well, we're gonna take it over to our paper making station so you can kind of see. So now I'm over at my tub that has water in it, and I'm going to dump in my paper pulp. I also want some interest, so I have some embroidery thread. My husband has an embroidery business, and so I have cut up some of these threads into little pieces. So I'm just going to sprinkle them into the water. Now occasionally you'll find some debris in your water, like this is probably a tape or something from an envelope. So I'll try to pick those out as best I can. My deckle is an 8.5-inch inside frame covered with some screening material and stapled into place. And that's your bottom deckle. And then this is the frame that goes around the top. And you want these to be the same size so that you'll get a uniform size. We'll still get that pretty deckled edge where the paper looks fibrous and kind of cool. And I'm going to take this and dip it into the water, go down to the bottom, and I'm kind of pulsating the pulp just a little bit. And I'm going to slowly bring it up. This will float, but mine's not clamped together. You could clamp it together, but I find that's just too time consuming. And I'm just going to raise it up out of the water level. And I like to just put it cattywampus across my container that I'm using and let it drip for a moment. And then I'll tilt it. And then I'll pull the frame off and set it aside. Here I have an old sheet that I've ripped, and I'm going to place it over the paper. This is how I do it because it's easier. And then I'm going to move it over here and lay it down. So let me show you that in just a moment. So now I've got my frame, I've got a towel laying down here. I'm going to lay this on top. And then I've got some sponges and rags. Let me get a couple of new ones. And I'm going to lay it in here and press. You see that the water's coming up. You want a good surface below you that doesn't get wet, ruined if it's wet. And I'm just squeezing off the excess water here. And then I'm going to slowly lift the frame from the paper. And then there's my sheet of paper. And here's where you can do it different ways when you dry it. You can let it air dry, or you can iron it. And in my case, I'm going to use a commercial press. So what I'm going to do is pick this out and put it on the press. So I'm over here at my commercial garment press. We again have the embroidery business, and we do printing on t-shirts. So this was an extra one. In fact, it was the very first press we ever purchased. So I thought it was kind of fitting that I can use it in my crafts now. Now, because this paper is really wet, I am going to grab another scrap of fabric. This is an old sheet. I want one that's gonna fit over my whole page. And I'm just gonna lay that on top. And then I have a pressing cloth that I'll put on here. And then I'm gonna press this down for a minute or two. So I'm pressing this about a minute, maybe 2 minutes. If you are using an iron at home, you will just kind of have to look at it. And I found that when I use my iron, that you just want to press and then pick up and move your iron over. You don't want to squish it back and forth because it'll move the paper and cause it to wrinkle. I love using this press. I'm glad that I thought of this idea and brought it out here so I could use it. All right, so let's check the paper and see what it looks like. The temperature I had set for 350, and it fluctuates back and forth because we are dealing with moisture, so it can drop the temperature a little bit. So I'm just going to peel back my layer of fabric. It looks relatively dry, so I'm going to remove it from the fabric. And then there is my handmade paper. Do you see all the beautiful fibers? I know we're in the shadows now. I'm under my pergola. And I've made some others earlier using the same fibers. And depending on how much paper you use, they can be really thick or they could be relatively thin. Here's some without any of the fibers in it. This was just all junk mail and miscellaneous papers. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing a quick little tutorial on the way that I hand make paper. Mentioned earlier, whenever I put my paper pulp in my water, I also put about 1/4 cup of some liquid starch. That helps these fibers adhere together and remake as paper. You don't need a whole lot because if you're already using papers, it will adhere back together. But if you're using organic materials or things other than actual paper to make your new paper with, then you'll need to add that. Okay, so I have spent some time making papers. On one afternoon, I spent 6 hours, and then the next day I spent 3 hours. That's when I recorded how I made these pages. So I'll show you what we made this session. So this is the paper once it's dry and it has been pressed. I used a commercial garment paper or press, not a paper press. It's for heat transfers. Maybe you have one because someone has a t-shirt business, or you have another kind of a press from like a Cricut, or you can even just use your iron. The iron will take longer, and you'll want to make sure that your paper gets dry and you can put it in like an old book to help flatten it out. So here is using all of the fibers or threads on there. This one's really thick, almost like cardstock thickness. The more paper pulp you have in your paper bath, the thicker your paper will be. So sometimes I'll let it get a little bit thinner so I can get some thin pages, and then sometimes I'll add more so I'll have some super thick pages. So here's some more with the fibers in it, and it is smooth. I was showing during another video, this is a really thin like paper text weight, and I'd used 2 different pens and wrote on this corner, and as you can see, it didn't go through, and you can see the text on there. Some more of this. So the more paper pulp, the thicker your paper will be. I will offer some of these in my shop, so I'll take some photographs, and it'll pretty much be, do you want this kind of a white, it's off-white, it's kind of off-white with a gray purple. This one even has glitter in it. You probably can't even see it, but there's a little bit of glitter in some of them. And then I'll probably have some in different colors. So let's flip over here. So here is without the fibers. That's just using junk mail. And that's where you get all that different interests of colors. If you can keep your junk mail mostly on the white side, then you'll get that lighter paper look. So this page was made using some plant material. I blend up a couple of flower petals from my peony that I had a couple of years ago in a box stored. And then this was some pink paper that I tore up and then put in there. So it came out kind of a peachy pink color, and it had a little bit of the plant material as well. There's another one of the plant material, and this one's so thin, it really does look and feel like text weight paper. And then this was some blue papers. In fact, one of the pages that I made was more turquoisey and it just fell apart. So I just ripped it and threw it back in the bath. And that's where I ended up getting these really cool textures in the pages. In fact, here is the teal. And this was just leftover papers. I used to make a lot of scrapbooking elements and sell them. And I saved where I had cut out letters. And that's how I made these. And this one's really thick. And you can fold this paper. I'm not going to fold these sheets, but you can fold it. So here is one that's weaker. I won't sell this one, but you can fold it in half and it acts just like regular paper. So you can use it. It's going to tear here because when I was making the paper, it was weak. And let's see, let's go. We got some more pinks. And then here's some that was just more of a green, blue, purple color. Just kind of depends on the base that you use. There's some more of the pinks. Oh, and I used my stencils to emboss. So when I pressed it, I pressed with the stencil a couple of times. It wasn't a tutorial that I wanted to show y'all, but it can be done. You could also just leave the stencil on top of the paper pulp and then put it in like a flat journal, a book, an old book, and let that press it into it eventually. So that was another thing you did. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed seeing how I make handmade paper. You can give it a try at home by using your basic tools of creating a paper bath using water and a little bit of liquid starch in your paper. Using your blender, I would use one that you could pick up at a thrift store or something like that. And then I had a window screen over a frame that had another frame on top of, so I could make my pages. And you can use your iron to dry your page. Hey, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Go down in the description box below for any of the products that I used, as far as if I do have a deckle available, and for the selling of these pages. And what else? Do come live on Mondays at 3:45 p.m. Central Standard Time and hang out with me where I'll show how I use some of these. That'll be some other tutorials that'll be coming up too. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with your friends. Y'all have a fabulous day. Bye, everybody.